Today, we are joined by Hashim Mulangwa, who is the Chief Executive of BG Green Systems and Solutions, but also the Strategic Advisor for Rwanda Development Bank. Decisions define leadership. Today, we want to understand how top executives make high-impact decisions that influence the organization's future.
First and foremost, draw a picture of what the end destination looks like. You really don't have to be acting like you're proving anything to your team. One is the fast thinking mode. People call it survival mode. Not be a slave to frameworks. Intuition is important.
Something within me told me.
Something within me told me.
Decisions define leadership. Today, we want to understand how top executives make high-impact decisions that influence the organization's future. Today, we are joined by Hashim Mulangwa, who is the Chief Executive of BG Green Systems and Solutions, but also the Strategic Advisor for Rwanda Development Bank. Welcome, Hashim.
Thank you. Thank you, Shamim. Thank you for having me.
To start with, we are making a lot of decisions lately. If you think about where businesses are going, where organizations are going, where countries are going. Now, for you whose work is influencing the development plan of a country, let's start from understanding, who are you?
Who am I?
Who are you really?
That's a good question. I'm someone who started out really being passionate about international development.
Yes.
I think the question you asked about who are you is actually a pertinent one, because any leader, when you get to a certain level, I think either people voice it or they wonder about it. Who are you to be the person who is making these decisions? So I earned my my chips working through international development over a period of 20 plus years. That includes international development, but also international finance. I've worked in the impact investment world. I've worked in the private sector and in government. So I paid my dues. I think I've gotten to a place where I can actually offer advice to leaders and executives at that level.
Great, yes. In the course of doing your work, because you see, like we say, leadership is such a huge responsibility. And the decisions we make either shape or break in a certain way. And meaning that there will be opportunities where we will make the right decision, but there are also challenges when we'll potentially not make the right decisions for whatever reasons those are. But in the course of your work, help us understand some of the frameworks that are so important or strategies that we can use to make high impact decisions.
Interesting. That's a good question. I think my view on that is I have a rather contrarian view on that. I think before you ask about frameworks, you need to actually, first of all, understand why you do what you do. Right? I have led teams and worked with top executives of organizations. And a key thing that I always advise people, and I would tell my teams, do not be a slave to frameworks. Frameworks are ways of actually thinking, structured thinking, right? But before you actually structure something, you need to actually step back as an organization. What is it that you're actually trying to do? What is the problem that you're actually trying to solve? How are you going to solve that problem? You want to be a media house that takes over the media industry in Africa. What are the top 3-4 things that you will actually do to get there? You will invest in your people. You will build partnerships with global media houses. You will mobilize resources in a certain way. And then the next thing that you do, you figure out what success looks like. So go back to setting a direction. First of all, understand what is it that you're actually trying to do? What problem are you trying to solve as an organization? And then you start thinking, okay, how do we know we are succeeding? So before you talk about data, you need to actually be clear about what the strategic direction of any organization is. And it's not an easy thing for leaders as well to do. Then data comes in because you need your KPIs to actually, know exactly what direction you're going and when you're succeeding.
Yes.
So thinking about frameworks then comes in after that. A framework to think about decision making is about, okay, so you make decisions in two critical ways, right?
Yes. Yeah.
One is using a process-based sort of like function.
Yes.
Data. There is that aspect of it. So you build systems, you collect data, as I said, because you have already set out a direction, you've already agreed on what objectives you're actually going to implement, and you look for data that actually helps you see where you're going, right? That data, that analytical aspect is actually an important part of making decisions, right? That structured up aspect.
Yes.
The other one is sort of the slow but also sort of automatic or intuitive element.
Yes.
Intuition is important, right? Those are two sort of approaches if you look at literature.
That's the one we call something within me told me.
Something within me told me.
Yes.
And even that I think actually is probably understating it. Because I don't believe that intuition just happens.
Yes.
Intuition comes out of experience.
Yes.
So there's the process aspect is one important element, which is technical. But there is an intuition where you actually make decisions about direction. Your team depends on you, but you depend on your own experiences, your expertise to actually see through the clutter, and you basically say, well, this is the direction we're going.
Yes.
So, I think there's a book by a fella called Daniel Kahneman, Slow Thinking, Fast Thinking, I think it's called. And Daniel Kahneman basically says, look, there are two ways you actually make decisions. The human mind makes decisions in two ways. One is the fast thinking mode. In some cases, people call it survival mode.
Yes.
But that is informed by your own experience. That is informed by what you do. A firefighter walks into a building and it's burning, but they can tell that this pillar is about to go down. This thing is about to go, south.
Or even tell what has sparked on the fire.
Exactly. They can tell from that. So it's not really intuition. It's basically learned experiences, right?
Okay.
And the second one is very structured, deliberate, sort of like thinking, where you use data to understand patterns, to understand direction, and with experience, as you pay your dues, as I was saying, you're able to look through, you've probably worked with people and somebody looks at an Excel and within
a few minutes,
they are able to tell you this is where we are going. This data actually is telling us this. That is experience. It is intuition, but out of expertise and exposure. So those are the two things. But in a sense, you get to the framework after actually understanding understanding the context in which you're working as a leader, understanding the direction of the organization that you're leading, where you want to go, ensuring that people actually know that direction and are buying into that direction. Then you bring the frameworks.
So this is quite interesting in one way or the other, and it's really, and I think in what you're saying, you're echoing the element of purpose, and people buying into the deployment of that purpose across the organization, that your people are able to buy into it.
Absolutely.
But I also like that you emphasize that sometimes we are slaves to frameworks. And you see, when we call on organizations to be more agile, more flexible, but we are consistent on this is the framework we've always used, sometimes it doesn't really give us the right decisions based on whatever is going on. But I want us to reflect on, for you as a strategic advisor, your role is not to make the decisions. Your role is to advise based on the data that is available, the exposure that you have, and the experience on what the decision that should be made by the leaders. Are there moments in your work where you have advised that this, based on XYZ, this is the solution I'm proposing, and perhaps the people we're advising go the other way and things have gone wrong? Talk to me about that.
I think that happens. I think for one, you have got to be comfortable with running into a situation where actually either you offer advice as a technical person, and a leader makes decisions based on, as we said, intuition, their own experience, their expertise. I mean, you know, I've worked in situations where you have somebody with a PhD in economics. And you have somebody with a PhD like Shamim in business. Right? And leadership. And these are two things that are actually, these are two people that are going to have a perception of any particular problem in a very different way. Right?
Absolutely.
So I always believe that here's the thing, the approach that you need, that you take is important. The approach and process you take is important. Diagnostic is important. Doing the homework is important. Looking at the data, looking at the problem in the context of the environment that you're in. You provide the data that shows the trends. You provide the data that says, look, you know, this product that we just launched, we want to launch, is actually going to address a certain market. The market is growing in this way. This is the number of people, right? This is how we actually can capture the market. These are the other players. You provide that data, but then a leader is actually going to make a decision based on what they think is right. They are the vision bearer.
Absolutely.
They know the direction in which they want to go. So I've been in situations where actually I've provided that. I think one recent experience actually is working on a project where we were trying to understand issues relating to constraints to access to finance for SMEs. I mean, that's a problem that everyone thinks about, right? Our economies are actually made up of SMEs contributing nearly 90% of the employment that most of our economies actually generate and value for that. So it's a big constraint. Access to finance is a big constraint. But why, how do you address that? There are demand factors on that because, you know, these businesses are small, they're informal. You're, you know, employing 3 people, employing 4 people. Banks want records, they don't have, you know, accounts. That is the nature of the challenge, right? And then on the supply side, you know, you don't have unlimited funds, right? So we were working with the partner who had invested a huge amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to actually try and do a diagnostic and understand these kinds of challenges. And we provided, you know, our input, and the partner. We had another partner we were working with that had not done the data analysis that we needed, and they decided based on their own priorities to go in a different direction, to work with the partner that they had, despite the advice that we gave them. So you do that all the time, but it is important that you actually keep in mind that the vision bearer actually has the decision-making ability, and they might see things differently.
So from that, and I think now, in a certain way, there will be moments when that becomes difficult for you. Especially when you sit on the other side where you also have a responsibility to play. And let's say when we go into spaces where we have to study communities and understand that the findings of our research impacts the value of the people that we're going to study, the value they're going to receive from that study. And I think that's it's core. And I can reflect on this from a perspective of, for us who study organizations, who study communities, and recognizing that whatever your study or your approach to that study, it will influence that data, meaning that we have responsibility to ensure that the data is clean, the data is valid. In the event that you advise that based on the data we have, this is the solution I would advise us to go on our way. There will be moments when, say, a funder, a partner, a stakeholder decides to take another way. That potentially might hurt the people that you're supposed to be protecting, you know, in that situation. What do you think that says about you, for example, as an individual? What are some of the lessons that you learn? Leadership lessons that we learn in situations of that nature where you don't have the power to make that decision, but you've used your expertise to give advice that will give us results that will potentially impact the communities positively.
Yeah. I think, you see, there are two ways to look at that.
Yeah.
One is that one where you as a leader, and I'll come back to giving advice.
Yes.
But you as a leader, what responsibility you have and you hold and how you make decisions, right?
Okay.
So I think one of the things that I have learned through my experience and working as an executive is data is one thing.
Yes.
But it is absolutely essential that you actually understand how to use that data in the context of the environment that you're actually working in.
And
right?
its interpretation as
and
well.
its interpretation
Okay.
in the messaging, right?
Yes.
It is absolutely essential. I think part of the challenge is that we work in technical fields, different fields.
Yes.
And some fields are very technical. You will find somebody who has a background in engineering,
Yes.
who basically is all about data, right? And then you find somebody else who actually has an eye for context, for behavior, for norms, for practices. If I take this data to the board, how is the board going to react to this messaging, right? So I had an experience many years ago. I was leading a project that actually worked on building capacity for some of the biggest institutions in Uganda.
Yes.
An institutional transformation project.
Yes.
We worked with the UNRWAs of this world, which UNRWA has just been closed down.
Yes.
KCCA, Uganda Revenue Authority, and some of the public service sort of commissions.
Yeah.
The idea was to try and understand, first of all, learn from those organizations that had actually transformed and been able to deliver services in a way that people were actually really amazed. URA at some point under Allen Kajina was that organization.
Yes.
And after KCCA under, what was her name?
Jennifer
Mississippi was that kind of organization.
Yes.
So we wanted to understand how these organizations actually transform and how leaders led these organizations.
Yes.
And data and processes was just one lesson in that process, right? The first thing that these leaders were actually able to do was to clearly clarify what the direction of the organization, where they want to see the organization go.
Yes.
First and foremost, draw a picture of what the end destination looks like. We want to be an organization that has this type of impact and provides public services in a certain way, right? Now, they were able to do that. But the second thing that they were able to do that was critical that we saw, was processes and systems, restructuring the organization to create a structure that actually really builds, delivers on that strategy.
Yes.
But thirdly, build the kind of partnerships and allegiances and support, external support and internal support that is needed. So a leader that pays attention to that realizes that this is really about people. The technical things, the data can tell you a story.
Absolutely.
So one example I have, we went to the public, I don't know if I should say this, but it's a long time ago anyway, the Public Service Commission, and we were putting in place, as you know, many institutions, government institutions have information management systems, data.
Yes.
You've worked with these institutions, private institutions, private sector institutions. Every institution has, information management system that actually can help have the data to make decisions, right? Now, I went into this organization and they had spent quite a bit of money with this institution creating a big sort of information management system. So I went to a presentation with the PS, and I think a minister at the time, and a few other people. And somebody, a guy who's our technical guy, had, laid out all these things, technical things, and how the information system works, a dashboard. When cases come in, this is how you're actually going to see the cases. This is how a workflow sort of like process. They move from this desk to this official to the other official. You had a situation where in one of the organizations, cases would take 60 days to 90 days to move from when people receive a case to the next investigation, not like the beginning process for the investigation. And you had really people like, being unhappy about that. You're delaying justice and all that. So we sat in this meeting, and there were different people, and there was a guy who was sitting at the end. We finished everything, and the senior people are like, this is amazing. It will actually make us more efficient and everything. But before we left, a senior government official actually, I think, had some really good insight to ask Godfrey in the corner, what do you think? So this then gave me the Godfrey effect. Godfrey says, but you see, I think this makes sense, it will help us. But there's nothing in this system that I don't have in my book. When a case comes, I note it in this book. I move with this book, and I take the case, the file, to the next officer. There's a record. I've done this for the last 5 years, for the last 10 years. There's a record of all these things. But my book, Godfrey kept talking about his book. So we left the meeting, and I said to my team, and I said, look, we've invested a lot of money in this system. But until you go and speak to Godfrey in registry, downstairs, if you go to any of these organizations, the Godfreys sit like in the bottom, in registry. This system worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for your data is to nothing. Because Godfrey begins the process.
It becomes useless.
It's useless.
The attitude towards it.
So it is important that leaders, when you're taking that responsibility, pay attention to the Godfrey effect. Who is using the data? What use is it? And why are they fearsome? Why do they have concerns about this system, this thing that you're bringing in? Before you actually do the numbers, before you run the regressions, before you run the tables, you need to pay attention to the behavioral elements of how you do.
So you see, I'm smiling because this is news to my ears. These are the daily experiences that I have in my work. And a lot of the times I think it's to also enable leaders to see that your team has the answers. So Godfrey knows what it feels to do what he does. Bring him into the transition process so that he can appreciate what you're trying to do. But I also like the element of there's a lot of data that is collected in organizations. And I know I was in a place where they gave me a survey that was completed. I said, okay, so what happened thereafter? There are a lot of our organizations that are ticking the box for employee engagement survey. But there's no response. Why are we collecting data that we're not using to actually influence things? But for me, what is central is in that you can work in an environment where the numerical data, if you tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And I say 5, you will not know what makes me happy and what doesn't. For me, who comes from a perspective of contextual data, I want to understand. Just ask me a question and let me talk. And then listen. So what I'm getting from you is that at the end of the day, there are different ways in which we can make those decisions, but we need to be very much more aware of the environment within which we operate in. Because like you gave an example, the Godfrey example is very vivid in terms of what could potentially happen. We invest a lot of money, but we have not thought about the users of these systems. So in moments like that, when the stakes are high, as an organization, you've invested money into systems, but people have rejected the systems. How do we redefine decision making?
Wow. I think one of the things that we need to recognize as leaders is that the process of data generation, the process of knowledge management in any organization, and how that feeds into decisions does not start when you deploy the survey.
Yes.
Right? I have been in organizations either as a top executive or even organizations that I'm supporting, where you see people chasing people to complete the survey. I mean, that
You've already
should
failed.
tell you something, right?
Yes.
Because they want to make sure they have an 80% engagement.
Yes, deadline is tomorrow.
So it doesn't start from there. I think leaders need to do the sort of tasking work.
Yes.
The difficult work of cultivating a culture of generating knowledge and managing that knowledge, right? A culture of research, a culture of learning, right?
Yes.
And I think that's where you start from. And one way to do that is, and I've experienced this, is you need to get to a place where more or less your team knows what question you're going to ask. Every decision that is coming to you.
Yes.
I mean, I worked for an organization that made investments all over the world, in the developing world, in different sectors.
Yes.
And some of the sectors are very dynamic sectors. You know, the technology, digital sector, everything is in a platform these days. Everything is a platform. So in health, telemedicine, in every single sort of sector has a digitization solution. And one of the things that I always asked, the first question I would ask is, so what has been done before?
Yeah.
I ask that even today in my current, what has been done before?
Yes.
There is no problem, challenge out there that people have actually not tried to solve.
To resolve,
So learn from experience of others and learn from other people that have done things to solve whatever challenge that you're actually trying to address. It's absolutely essential to do that. What that does, it basically tells people that they can learn from others, but two, you don't own these problems. Don't be arrogant to think that you are the person who is the first person who wants to solve this problem.
Absolutely,
So that's the first place that you start.
Yes.
The second one is you cultivate a culture of people being comfortable with ambiguity, with searching for solutions, experimentation.
Not even having that clarity.
Not having clarity. And I think in some ways it's a bit counter to the idea that the sort of like the data concept and decision making, where basically you think your data analysis is actually watertight, right? It gives you a clarity on what decisions you're going. No, I mean, get the data, let people look at the data, but let them tell you what they think, because it's all about you put in the data depends on what you put in.
Absolutely, yes.
So there might be a problem with the survey that you deployed.
Yes.
It didn't ask the right questions, as you're saying. It didn't ask contextual questions.
Yes.
So cultivate a culture where people actually really are comfortable with not having clarity. In my field, in international development, one of the things, every conversation that I have, if I see somebody speaking on a podcast or an interview like this, and they say, you see, the solution to this problem is this. I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. There is no watertight solution.
Absolutely, yes.
So you need to actually be able to encourage people to be experimental, to be innovative, challenge the process, challenge that structured process of actually finding solutions. I think those are two really critical things. The other element is have diverse teams. I think it's absolutely essential to actually have expertise, people with different perspectives, because they bring those perspectives and their backgrounds to the process of actually generating ideas. And one of the things that I always say to people as well is, it doesn't matter what level you're at. Know what you know. Know what you don't know. And seek out people who actually have an understanding of the things, your weak points, your blind spots.
Absolutely.
Right? In that team. And I think fourth is enable people to actually make decisions at different levels.
That's a huge challenge for many leaders.
Yeah.
Wow. How do we even get there?
If I can be blunt, I think it's very difficult for people to do that.
Yes.
It's very difficult. But I think it takes a certain level of confidence.
Absolutely.
It takes a certain level of experience. You need, as a leader, I think you need to get to a place where you really realize that you really don't have to be acting like you're proving anything to your team.
Absolutely.
Right? Your team, you're there to lead the team in a certain direction.
Yes.
They are there to give you direction. They have expertise. You have hired them for a reason.
Yes.
They have technical skills. They understand things that you might not understand. You have a younger generation today that looks at things very differently.
Absolutely.
Managing Gen Zs in a work environment is complicated.
Their understanding of work is totally different.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you bring your insecurities to your job, to be very honest, you're going to find it difficult to influence and lead others in that way. So I think letting go, you get to a place where you learn to let go, you learn to know the things that you know, because ultimately, the decision is yours. Like the strategic decisions are actually yours.
Yes.
Even when you disagree, even when you disagree with your team, even when they disagree with you, ultimately you make those decisions. I don't know if we have enough time for an example of that. I mean, I worked on a big project when I worked in the impact investing world. We invested in a company that was doing a lot of work, innovative work, around predictive algorithms and technologies. At the time, it was, I mean, this is not a long time ago, but AI is mainstreamed right now. But at the time it wasn't. I think there were first movers. These are people, there's a company that was doing work in South Africa, but also doing work in Brazil and Mexico. And they were using these tools to predict crime in certain localities. Now, you know that is a hot topic.
I know.
Especially in the developed world in certain places, because of racial profiling, because of how these
data
models,
security as well,
data security and everything. So there were riots at some point against this kind of technology in the States and in Mexico. But we were interested in this technology for the developing world because, in some of the countries where we were investing, in Nigeria and in Kenya, for example, you had one policeman for every 4,000 or nearly 10,000 people, right? So these countries actually have serious concerns around security, around providing security for people, around crime. And governments were telling us and institutions were telling us that they can actually use these kinds of technologies to know where to deploy certain resources, right? And be more effective. So that was one case for it. The second one was the fact that even if you stay away from these predictive technologies, the governments are going to use them anyway. So you need to be involved. You need to understand how these models actually work and understand the biases so that you can actually influence how they are deployed. So my team at some point revolted. They're like, we cannot be actually encouraging this kind of thing. This is an investment we had already done, but they had run into trouble. We cannot be encouraging these kinds of biases in the US, black people are being profiled in Brazil, this is the case and everything. And I said to them, look, I understand what you're saying. I understand there is data that shows that these models, predictive models, algorithms can actually have a bias against people, of a certain race or income or all these things. I understand that. I really understand that and I can relate to it. But I also understand that this is not a train that you're going to stop.
Yes.
Right? So we talked about decision making, right, as a leader. Intuitively, from my experience, I knew that this is something that is not stoppable. So I think Heifetz calls it sitting on the balcony. You need to sit on the balcony as a leader and see what is going on.
Bird's eye view.
Because that uncertainty is going to happen. That turbulence is going to happen. But if you're sitting up here, stay focused on the North Star. Stay focused on what it is that you actually want to do. So I said to them, I actually wrote a memo to the investment committee and basically said, look, my team was saying we should not disperse the next, $2 million to this company that we had invested in, probably, a lot more than that, because this innovation is problematic. But I know that innovations are always going to be problematic. They are going to be resisted, right? So as a leader, I use my intuition, my experience-based learning and intuition to basically say this is where we want to go. And I made, a decision based on that.
So, wow, that's quite a full one, because I'm now reflecting on, as you were speaking, I was able to see myself in your space. Because for us now who have a responsibility to look into organizations from that level, one of the challenges that leaders have is really to detach themselves from the organization. Then you become part of, you don't see what the other person sees. But I guess now the importance then is still goes back to echoing the purpose we are doing what we are doing. So that it doesn't become I say it so, you say it so thing, or who are we blaming? But in that moment then when we're thinking about intuition and experience, lately I've been reflecting on my career and the level of exposure and experience I've had to work with the different spaces within which I am. And I started to ask myself a question, what does my work mean? My work, my approach to my work, my love to my work mean in terms of the person that I am becoming or I have been. Do you look back and think to yourself, this makes sense to me? And how did you get to that? Because remember, today, we're not just waking up to go to work. We also want to see ourselves in that, because the things you just highlighted in terms of the traits of a leader, being purposeful and deploy that purpose and bringing your people along on the journey, and not just being on your high horse, but also being okay with ambiguity and letting your people make the decisions or guide you into making that decision. How do you realize that? If you look back into the Hashim growing up.
So I think I can't say I have realized that. You're work in progress. You need to actually accept that you're work in progress. I mean, you've put in 20 plus years of doing whatever it is. You're being asked to come for interviews and sit on panels. You have arrived? I don't think so.
Absolutely.
I don't think so. I think you are work in progress. You have a certain perspective. You have expertise, technical. You have learned experiences, right? But I think the first thing, how you get to a place where you're comfortable being in that space, where people actually seek you out in some way, or where you make decisions and your team is like, let's get this done, is you have to work on yourself. And it's a long process. Work on yourself. It starts with you. one of the things that you hear a lot in, in sort of like literature around leadership, and you know this better than I do, is this idea of modeling behavior.
Please say it again.
Modeling behavior. You
so
are
powerful.
not a leader if you can't model what it is that you actually want to see.
Yes.
And I think I have a book, I write in my books, and even when I was preparing for this, I was looking at some of the books that I've been reading over the years, and I put dates, and I'm like, one of the things that I think is very difficult to do is actually model behavior.
Yes.
It's extremely difficult. Because you'll ask people to do that engagement survey at the end of the year and send a CEO email or HR email, whatever it is. But everybody is actually looking at this and say, how are you modeling the kind of things, the values that you are actually saying we should have?
Yeah.
You're saying people need to be accountable. We haven't seen you being accountable. You haven't seen you say, I made this decision.
Yes.
I was wrong.
Yes.
You were right.
Yes.
Right? To your team. You haven't seen you one time say, I actually don't know.
Yes.
I don't know. You know better. You just finished a master's degree in, quantitative economics.
Yes.
Tell me, what does the data say?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you don't model those things, we don't see you on the floor.
Yes.
We haven't seen you behind these cameras and looking on the other side and making sure that actually, you experience what it is that we do. Model behavior, have clarity, but you can model that behavior that you want to see until you have clarity around your own values.
Absolutely. Oh.
What makes you who you are?
Yes.
And not one CEO is the same as the other. Yes. It's okay to come into an organization and try and shape it in a different way based on what your value system is.
Yes.
Respect,
and people will respect you for that, by the way.
Yes. Or he's a bit too upfront.
Yes.
He speaks his mind.
But
the other CEO was not like that. They will expect it. You're transparent. They will accept that. So being clear about what drives you, what your values are, is a very important part of that. And then the rest gets into play. Then you will set a direction for people, for them to understand where you're going. After they really try and figure out what makes this person, right? You will inspire people in that direction. You will actually, pull on their strings, on their heartstrings, to actually believe in you. You call up somebody and say, but how are you today, right?
Yes.
How is your child? I heard that your child is in hospital.
Yes.
Yeah. Speak to things that people actually care about, right? And model that behavior. It's absolutely important. Yes. So the question you asked is exactly, in terms of, how do you get to that place where actually people can listen to you, and how do you build that credibility? It starts with you.
Yes.
And over a period of time, you gain the confidence to make the decisions that people can actually go with.
Yes.
Shamim has said, we do this, we will do that.
Yes.
Because I trust them. Building trust.
Yes.
Building trust for people to collaborate and work together and follow your direction is absolutely critical. But you start with you. You start with you.
That's a huge challenge, but you see also, we've talked about that anyway. As we wrap up, we know that you're a man of your own values. And like you said, that we are all on the journey.
Yeah.
Once you get to a spirit of arrivalism, then something is wrong. We are constantly evolving. What is the one thing that you do that you think, I wouldn't want any of my kids to have this character?
Oh my God.
Let's close with that.
Oh my God. Oh wow.
Yes. An area of improvement that you are dealing with.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think I think I have always admired people that listen. I think I was quite empowered from an early age by the influence that my father had on me.
Yes.
Would sit on the table as an 8, 9, 10-year-old or walk from the mosque after, a sermon or something, and I say, but the sheikh said this and this and this, and then he says, what do you think?
Yes.
And I think it was the most powerful influence on me, in a sense, in terms of my view matters from an early age.
Yes.
The downside to that was that I became a very talkative child and a teenager.
Are you still talkative?
I think I am. I think I am.
Okay.
And in my, as I got into the workspace and everything, I became quite opinionated.
Okay.
And ambitious and everything.
Yes.
But I learned that it is absolutely essential to actually listen, it's good to voice your opinion.
Yes.
But it's even more important to listen to others, right?
Okay, yes.
So I have learned to incorporate that. It's an acquired skill.
Yes.
In my leadership style. Some people actually, have given me feedback that I am a good listener.
Yes.
But I think the default point is always to move to the center of the table,
Yeah.
You should learn to step back.
Okay.
That I think I would want my children to be able to listen, to step back, and not always move, in that direction over time.
Yes.
But I would let them make their mistakes and learn from that for now.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Hashim, thank you so much for sharing with us. The purpose we have this conversation is to enable leaders recognize that it's a journey.
Yes.
We don't want leaders to always put themselves on a pedestal and have fear of turning up. It's okay for us to make mistakes and learn from others. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
I appreciate that.
Really
Thank you for having
an honor.
me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.